I saw the signs and I wanted to make sure I followed the rules on the signs. Turn the microphone on. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dustin Meeks, and I'm an associate attorney at Barnes & Thornburg in Indianapolis, and assisting the Redevelopment Commission with the acquisition and disposition of some real estate related to the financing of a new jail facility for the county. We're kicking off that process today, and what I have for the Redevelopment Commission's consideration are two resolutions. And Dana, are they going to be 2024-1 and 2024-2, or?
Yes, there was no resolutions at the last.
Oh, okay, great. So the first and you have copies of both of these. They just weren't numbered, but we'll number them before they go. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh. Sorry, Dana was hiding them. Make sure I pass them out in the right order here. Okay. Yep. That's. I want to give you the stack. Both quite brief resolutions, and I'll talk through them as you get the chance to look them over, and then happy to answer any questions as well. So the first resolution deals with the Redevelopment Commission's authority as a governmental entity under Indiana Code 36.1.11.8 to receive a transfer of real estate from another governmental entity by adopting an identical resolution to the entity that owns that real estate. And here, Owen County, and represented by the Board of Commissioners of Owen County, own a piece of real estate in the county that they would like to transfer to the Redevelopment Commission. And so what this first resolution does, Resolution 2024-1, is it communicates to the Board of Commissioners of the county that the Redevelopment Commission will accept that transfer, and then at the Board of Commissioners meeting next week, they will consider an identical resolution acknowledging that they would like to transfer the property. And so then under the statute, because both bodies have adopted an identical resolution signaling that they would like to transfer the property among them, ownership of the property will be transferred from the county to the Redevelopment Commission. And the reason to do that is that the Redevelopment Commission has the ability to dispose of property using more simplified procedures than the county does. And the ultimate intent is that this piece of county-owned real estate that will be transferred to the Redevelopment Commission will be used as consideration to acquire a different piece of real estate that's located here in Spencer. And so the second resolution that you have is related to two processes that are going to run parallel with each other to make that purchase of the property in Spencer using the county property as consideration. And so those two processes are under 36.7.14.19, which is the portion of the Redevelopment Commission statute that authorizes the acquisition of property by the Redevelopment Commission. And then the second process will be under 36.7.14.22, which is the portion of the Redevelopment Commission statute that deals with the Redevelopment Commission's disposal of property, so sale of property. So what this first resolution does is it ratifies the receipt by the Redevelopment Commission of appraisals of the two pieces of property, and having those appraisals in hand, we can begin the process of identifying the site in Spencer for acquisition under the acquisition statute, and identifying the county parcel for disposition under the disposition statute. And once both of those processes have run their course, we'll have one piece of property that we're able to sell and one piece of property we're able to buy, and then in one transaction we'll sell and buy, and so you'll swap them. So happy to answer any questions about either Yeah, so I turn it over to the commissioners, or to Dana if you have something.
I just wanted to make sure that it's known that there will be a public hearing on this.
Cool. Yeah,
And that will occur likely in September.
Correct, yeah. So the acquisitions process, which is very similar to the process for creating a tax increment financing area or amending the economic development plan for an economic development area, has a public hearing step in it. So a notice of that will go out in the paper. And so, yeah, there will be a public hearing in the later part of the process. That's true.
I have a question. On the appraisals, will that be able for the public to view?
So the both of the statutes, 36.7.14.19 and 36.7.14.22, provide that the appraisal documents are only for the review and information of the Redevelopment Commission. So those documents are not public records under the statute.
Could you, well, sorry. Could you explain what the purpose of that is?
Yeah, so the reason that the General Assembly has provided this particular requirement around these appraisals is that part and parcel, so the Redevelopment Commission exists as a more flexible tool for local units of government to engage in economic development transactions. And that often requires negotiation with third parties. And so the statute is structured to avoid a situation where the Redevelopment Commission is not able to engage in negotiations because information that you create kind of an information equality between the negotiating parties, and you can't then engage in negotiations with a third party that you're acquiring property from. So here, where the Redevelopment Commission is going to acquire a piece of property, it would be disadvantageous for example, the owner of that property to have a copy of the appraisals that you have and know what, perhaps the true value of that property might be. And really it's that, the taxpayers paid for the appraisals, and then give the taxpayer paid for advantage over to the other negotiating party. I think the General Assembly viewed that as inappropriate, and so that's why the statute is structured that way.
Is there a point that figures become public knowledge once a deal is approved in, and then it becomes public knowledge?
So for the acquisition of the property, for the disposition of the property, when the property is to be sold, one piece of that process is a publication of the availability of that property for purchase, and there's a 30-day period during which any member of the public could put in an offer in conformance with the term sheet for the purchase of the property, and the price in that term sheet would be within the bounds of the appraisals for that property.
So that gives you the time to have transparency with the public.
Well, yes, and it's not per se. I guess the statute provides that those appraisals are not public documents, but it's not a crime, I guess, if you wanted to discuss them. It's just that statutorily they're designed to not be public record documents themselves for the strategic reasons that the Redevelopment Commission is engaged generally in a property transaction related to those appraisals.
So the whole purpose of this confidentiality is to protect our entity when we're in the negotiation process, to keep from getting undercut, and
Right.
protect the owner of the property as well, so it's a fair negotiation for us.
Right, correct.
But then there'll be transparency later as much as.
Right, certainly after the consummation of the transaction, when there isn't the possibility that information being public would damage your negotiating position, there wouldn't be any reason why you couldn't publish those documents. It would just be potentially disadvantageous, and the General Assembly has provided the ability to not disclose that information to avoid that disadvantage for the Redevelopment Commission.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that.
Craig, can you turn your microphone on?
Oh, sorry.
In the redevelopment.
Amateur
commission-
here, is that better? Am I on? Okay, sorry about that. I wanted to speak a little bit about this process. I really like the idea of this property coming into redevelopment because then you have different parties represented from county government. You've got your commissioner, you've got your county council, you've got at least 2 people from the general public that have an independent interest. And all of our interests, at least I feel like our interest is to do what's best for the county. And I can appreciate the confidentiality at the front end to protect the negotiating power of this entity. But then there'll be a point that I think we can make things very transparent by the time we get to the public hearing that'll be in September. And I'm interested in hearing concerns today. We don't want to take too much time, but you've taken the trouble to come here, and we would like to, as a commission, to consider what's on your mind, okay? But we're all on this start end of this process, so there's going to be a lot of unanswered questions at this point, but I am interested in your concerns, so we can weigh those as a body, because we're here for the interest of the county. And I'm excited about the opportunity, if this works and is done the right way, we could end up with a property that's going to be a great property for the jail, with the property that I understand has some issues as far as not being suitable for the jail. And I think there'll need to be a little bit of trust in this entity to make decisions with the information, because we are here. I'm here as an independent CPA. Bobby's here as a person who's been involved in government. We've got people involved with your government. But I think the goal is going to be to have an orderly, well-informed process within the commission, and we'll be glad to be transparent about it when we're allowed to. So I just wanted to voice that up front. I'm very happy that all of you are concerned and here today. And I wouldn't mind spending a little bit of time just to voice your questions so we can take note of that. And we may not have the answers today, but we appreciate your concern. You came here today, and I think I want to respect your time to be here today. So with that, I'd just like to open up the floor for a little bit for public questions.
They should come up to the table and
Come on
turn
up,
the
Sam.
microphone on. So that they can make sure it gets recorded, state their name.
Sam Hobbs. Thanks, Craig. I appreciate you taking the call, and Bobby, and all that. I've got several questions, as well as some people sitting behind me. You mentioned, sir, that the state statute says that, you hold this in tight circle until the transaction is ready to be made. That states, it's not a guideline, it's not statute, it's recommended that they hold that. They could let that out if they choose to do so. Is that correct?
So the statute provides that the documents are for the redevelopment commission's information and not for public distribution. But there's not, I guess the statute doesn't provide any penalty for the distribution of those documents.
It could be laid out if they chose to.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. It would pose a challenge for the redevelopment commission.
This takes me into a couple of questions, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. And I'm not picking on nobody here. I've been after this jail project for 13, 14 years, and it seemed like it's just been kicked down the road long enough. And you got the president, commissioner here, you got the president and council here. The first thing that I want to bring up, this has never been vetted through the commissioners as a board. Never. It wasn't voted on. There was no decision in a public meeting to proceed this way. Gary knows that. Joe Lowe, I spoke to Joe Lowe a while ago, and he said that he was going to try to be here, didn't know if he could or not. He spoke up in the last Wednesday's commissioners meeting and asked. So you went to a redevelopment committee meeting and had a meeting and voted on moving forward. He's not aware of it. Bob Curry wasn't aware of it. That's my first issue. I think when you talk about things being vetted through the Board of Commissioners, which you just mentioned, that's the Board of Commissioners. It's all commissioners. It's all council people. This has not been vetted through the county council at all. It hasn't been brought before the last meeting with redevelopment, okay? To me, I think that's out of step. I'd like to see it brought to the commissioners, for all three commissioners to agree if this is what they want to do, move forward, so on and so forth.
That would be the next commissioner meeting.
Yeah, but it should have happened. The problem I have with it, Mr. Attorney, is that the meeting was called prior to the commissioners' meeting, the last redevelopment meeting, and prior to the council meeting. I would think, as president of the council and as president of the commissioners, that they would have wanted to present this to the rest of the commissioners and the rest of the council, as well as the taxpayers, to know that this was the process.
Can I stop you for a minute?
Sure.
Sam? This may not have been vetted in a public council meeting, but I have been in ongoing talk with the council today. Before the last council meeting, I am prepared to sit here and do exactly what they are wanting me to do.
Okay.
And so,
Well, yeah.
even though it was not vetted and voted on in a public meeting, that does not mean that I did not go in and continue the conversation with them.
And Polly, I'm going to jump in with that conversation as well. But I don't know what Joel and Bob are telling you, because I know for a fact that we've discussed this. It wasn't in a public meeting. We had a joint session here with the commissioners and the council to look into doing a property transfer on this particular piece of property. When we found out that the redevelopment commission would be the best avenue to go through, spoke to each one of those individuals, and they wanted to continue to move forward. No, it was not voted on in a meeting. That's when it was brought to this board, and the attorney can attest to that. So,
And so can I, because I know there's rumblings about it and stuff like that, you know, and talking, and just as you're saying here, I have a fellow council member here behind me, doesn't
I know, and I talked to Amy today, and I want to go forward with this. I've vetted this process with our council attorney. It is a legal process. I went out and actually have been on our county property. I am on board with this transfer, and I feel like it is absolutely in the best interest of the county. I am not on board with not having the appraisals be in public, and as much as it pains me, I can't be on board with this until the public knows I mean, I want this to be totally transparent, because that's what I feel like. I have had multiple people come and talk to me, and their concerns is how far apart are these properties, and that's what concerns me, because I've told multiple people that come to this meeting, it's going to be made public what the appraisals are, and you'll see that it's not that far apart. And now that we can't even do that, I mean, that upsets me.
well, and we could do that, Polly. We could do that right now.
I would like to see that happen.
Council tells us that that's not an issue. Now, what he did say is it will open up possibly for competition for the property, which the state put that together for a reason. I understand that. And I think anybody in here who's got any business sense understands that as well. And Tom, you're like me, you're busting it together. I got it.
Well, here's the way I would look at that. I think we'll have the ability to look at these confidentially, and if we think we're too far apart and we can't move forward, we're done. If we're going to move forward, I think that's going to be the time for transparency, because then we're going to want the public to know before the public hearing. So there's going to be a lot of steps in this. Nothing's going to be quick.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of steps in
And it
it.
can be stopped on down the road, because there is going to be public hearings. I just want to touch base on the county's aspect of this. Whether people agree, disagree with me, it is what it is. We're trying to transfer a piece of property that we've had in our possession for over 50 years with no tax base coming in off of it. 96 acres, $0, with a liability of a landfill on it. Transferring that piece of property that could be used for a forest farm, tree farm, whatever, for a usable piece of property with the infrastructure that we need. At no dollars transferred. All we're getting is property tax on the backside of that. It's a win-win.
Karen, can I ask a quick question? So we don't get anything, any income from marketable timber?
We could sell it one time and we're done. It'd be
One time?
30 years before you're gonna timber it again.
Can I say something on that? Because we have timbered our property several times, and my concern is, Amy, is if we market that timber and cut that timber, that is the only reason anybody would buy this property that I can tell. Like I said, I've been out there today, I've walked that property, and there's one flat piece of land that's maybe 7 or 8 acres that's
And that's
flat.
fine.
But you can't, it was
That's
a
landfill,
landfill,
yeah.
and you couldn't put
Right.
anything on
No, I
it.
do
The
know
rest
that.
of it's hills and hollers with trees. You cut that timber off, and then you go to sell that piece of property, and who's gonna wanna buy it?
Was the marketable timber included in the appraisal?
That's what I wanted to see.
It was not.
That's what, a question of mine, that's why I would like to see the
It would be
appraisals.
worthless at that point.
I'd like-
That's the only value to the land.
I'd like-
I know that, and that's why I wanted to know.
The
if
land
it was
is
included in the
worth
appraisal.
nothing without that.
I'd like to go back to that, appraisal, through some meetings that's been had. How many people sitting in this room know what appraisals are?
I don't.
County attorney
And that's what I
knows.
was looking forward to seeing today.
Yeah, we're not even gonna see those unless we move forward with the resolutions.
Okay, but the county attorney knows what the appraisal is. Does anybody else sitting in this room know what the appraisals are?
No, I
Am I
don't.
allowed to talk? I received an email with those attached and was asked to print them out. Other than that, and it went into envelopes, and that is the only correspondence I have. Yes, I know what they are, but I also was given a confidentiality statement when those were received. I can't say what they are because they didn't belong to me and it belonged to the county, but that.
But there's other people that know what the appraisals are, because I spoke to somebody today who knows exactly what the appraisal was. Also, the first appraisal, how many appraisals has been done? 2?
There's two different companies.
So statutorily, it's 2 independent appraisals of each property.
Sure.
So there's 4 reports,
From 2 different?
2 appraisal firms, 1 for each property.
Okay.
And I will speak on that, Sam. Originally, Rich Fig had called me and told me he had it done, and I said, did you consider that the one property had no sewer, all it had was water? He did not, so I told him to go back and refigure to make sure that we had it proper. The one had all the utilities, the fiber, the things that we needed to develop versus the other one. And plus, I think they also had its own business, or residential instead of agricultural. So those came in sealed and were never opened. The only other appraisals that came back in were sent to the attorney.
So who was the other company besides Fig that did the appraisal?
Ben Hopkins, I think it is, Hopkins Appraisals.
Okay, so these appraisals come in, the first one that came in, I believe you mentioned that at the commissioner's meeting, that it didn't meet apples to apples, so they sent for another appraisal. I think the question on a lot of people's mind here, and I appreciate what Craig said about holding the appraisals, but the big question on everybody's mind here is what's the county leaving on the table? We're trading 9.6 acres against 95 acres, and first of all, the newspapers here, I'm glad, I want Brett Franklin to know, I spoke to Mr. Franklin this morning in length, that this is not about against him in any way. He's a great guy, he's a businessman, he's a developer, he's smart, he's got a lot of talent. So I just want him to know that this is nothing opposed to him. The appraisal come in, it's my understanding, that didn't meet the specs, so they sent out for another appraisal. You mentioned that in the meeting.
I said that as Commissioner Burton said, I said that there was some wrong assumptions
Yes.
made, and so we had them correct those
Okay.
assumptions and then directed to the redevelopment commission.
But I think, and for as a taxpayer, and I know as myself, I want to know what we're trading. Are we trading apples for apples, or are we trading apples for oranges, and is the county leaving stuff on the table? 9.6 acres against 95 acres, even though it's landfill and hills and hollers, the public has a right to know what we're trading
I think they will.
They will.
down there. That's my biggest concern. So if one praises it for $100,000, next praise for $400,000, you're leaving money on the table for the county.
But we're not to the point where we're ready to deal with those situations yet until we get through this step.
Right.
And the other thing is, if this property was so valuable, why haven't we sold it by now? We've kept it as an untaxed treasure sitting here. Are we collecting any property tax off of that? The county owns it. We don't get a dime from it. Exactly. And it's been that way. That landfill was opened in 1959.
I'll have to agree with that, but it still doesn't take away the part of what we're leaving on the table, 9.6 acres against 95. The assessment coming up for property for the appraisal for 9.6 acres is not going to equal what 95 acres is, guaranteed. It's not going to happen. So do we move the goalpost to where it's less acres for the 9.6? You know, does it come down to 50 acres?
Those are decisions we'll have to make, Sam.
And that's where I'm asking you, so that'd be decisions that you.
I mean, we're gonna look at these with a fresh eye.
Sure.
That's why I'm thankful we have a body of people here from different backgrounds, so it's not under just one umbrella. I think that's one reason they designed the redevelopment commission to do things like this.
Right.
So you have people involved that we're trying to do our best for the public interest. And I'm like Polly, I want to be transparent as much as we can. And if we get to that point that we feel like we need to move the goalpost, so to speak, that'll be discussed. I have no clue because I'm not seeing the numbers. I've not seen the
You
numbers.
don't, okay, so,
I don't
And
have an idea.
I do agree with Craig. I do like the fact that it is taking it out of, I mean, the commissioners and the council's hands and have, even though they're, you know, we're just one of many, because we do have one more, vacant position that we need to fill. And I hope to fill it with a, tax-paying citizen to bring a new perspective.
Could you have somebody with a real estate background do that? That would be your best bet.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that person will
I
actually
agree.
that person will be appointed by the county council.
great. I just think the transparency thing needs to be done in the public meetings.
I
And
do
you
too.
mentioned that on the council meeting Monday night, that you agreed. You said that you thought it would be in the best interest of everybody. And I agree with you
I
100%.
And I gotta tell you, Sam, we all heard about these code sections just today, so that was all news to
And
me.
I went back when I got the email while I was sitting at lunch, and I went back and
Me too.
read the Indiana code, and it is in there, but I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the public not being able to see.
And in reference to that, nothing against you, Jim, sir, it's a code. It's not a mandate.
Right.
It does not tell you can't do this. It's simply a code. Dealt with it many years. And I just think the transparency, Paul, I mean, you've talked about this a lot, and stuff like that in the public meetings. I mean, Gary's talked about it in the commissioner's meeting. The other two commissioners and another 6 council members need to know what's going on.
Right, I agree.
And when we talked Monday night, that you thought a joint work session between all entities, and maybe that's down the road a little bit after you just the board gets to look at this, before any decisions are made that acquires any property or transfers any property. I don't know exactly how that all works, but, the public should know exactly what's on the table. Apples for
And
apples.
it's out there in the paper. Nicole printed that in the paper about this process and what we were trading and the numbers, and so the public should be aware if they're not.
But you know how it is, Gary, it's better to come together in a public meeting and sitting at the table.
It would be great if we could get everybody in a public meeting, but
Well, if you.
And I did want to mention that public meeting in September, I think we were going to try to schedule that in the evening,
Okay,
probably in
good.
a
That's
bigger
my next-
venue,
thank you.
because we do want that to be a good public comment meeting. And I would like to think by then, there'll be a lot more information that we will have decided on that we can share. Because how can you have a public meeting if you're not transparent at that point?
Right,
So the transparency is going to be there.
okay.
I think we're going to use this process in a way that protects the county initially as we wrap our heads around these numbers and start making the decisions, but then There will be a time for transparency, make no
So
mistake.
at what point will these appraisals become, where we can
Well,
talk about them?
We'll decide that once we look at them and see where we're at. I mean, if we look at these things and decide we're not even close, then we're just wasting time. The whole thing will stop.
But we have to go through the process. And speaking of the land options, I personally have spent months searching this county, this area for a piece of property to build a jail on. We have ran out of options. Other than eminent domain, and I refuse to do something like that. That's just unheard of in my world. We've talked to Vicky Baseman. I've talked to Charlie Mullen. I've talked to Victor Gupa, or whatever his name is, that lives in Florida, that owns a bunch of land here. I've talked to several different places. Ryan and I have worked together on several different, what about this, what about that? We have no options other than the existing site that we have, so we'd have to tear down income according to several companies and issues. That building site's not suitable for what we're trying to do. So we ran out of land options, and this is a pretty good deal. It puts us in a really good location for all of the community, the town of Spencer, the county, kind of separates our services from one another in case of a disaster. We're not all bundled up there in one spot. So our options are pretty limited. Unless somebody's got a piece of property here today that wants to share it with us.
And on that, and I'll leave, I'll be done, but I did meet with DNR about the current existing property. It can be built upon with ease, no problem. We are in a 2% floodplain, and that's it. We're not in a major floodplain. He says if it does rain 40 days and 40 nights, we're at the mercy of the Lord ourselves. And so he says there is no concern about building the jail at the current existing place where we bought the storage units. Yeah, is it prime? No, but they're building across the street every day. I asked him how they done that. He said they met certain code, they raised it up some certain, but they're in across the highway, they are in the flood zone. Where the storage units are not, you're in the 2% floodplain, and that's it. I also met with Duke Energy at the site. Spoke to two different gentlemen. We have a 50-foot variance on the side of the poles. We get 10-foot, we can move it in within 10 feet. We can get an encroachment. I spoke to the daycare center. I spoke to Ashley that owns the duplex, and they're willing to sell. We could own the whole piece of property. I also met with the sheriff and his needs.
That makes no sense. Why would we buy a piece of property when we can swap for $0 and keep that income?
If you're swapping apples for apples, that's the whole point.
And I think we'll find that out.
Then
So you've got an option for us if this don't work out?
It's just something on the table.
At least we got an option.
Different meetings stand for different entities.
It is, I just will say there is an option, so.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming, Sal. Hi, Ryan. Sheriff Ryan.
To make a point on the current property that we're on, the only way to make that jail fit is to tear down our current jail. Even with the easements, and we wouldn't be able to go up to the easement of Duke, we would have to tear down the current jail and house those inmates somewhere else for 18 months to 2 years. That's going to cost $1.8 to $2.4 million to do that. That's way more than it's going to be any difference probably in whatever these appraisals are. I guarantee those properties are worth that much money. The other thing is it shoots you in the foot in the future. If you decide that you need to add on because we outgrow a new jail, the size of it, that one right there, and we outgrow that pod, that jail allows us to build another pod onto it. You cannot build another pod onto that jail. We would be back at square one looking for another new piece of property to try to fit a new jail on that's going to be twice that size. Why would we spend that much taxpayer money building 2 jails when we could build 1 jail and get what we need and add and have the room for future expansion if that is needed? We will shoot ourselves in the foot if we build on that property. And in 40, 50 years, when our population increases in our jail and we're looking at doing this again, we're going to have to build a whole new jail instead of one little pod.
You just make a good point, I'll defend the sheriff on that, because the original plans in 2021, which are probably all onions, that designed and built for that we spent the $250,000 on already, was a different jail system compared to what Sheriff White is needing, and I met with Sheriff White I understand his needs and concerns, so he does make a good point.
Tom?
Sorry, I'll come up here. Tom Averill, first of all, I think we need to refocus on why you're here. You know, what their points are valid, but that's different entities. So I get it. You are going to be the property. It doesn't matter to you. First of all, I want to ask council to make sure I understand this. Once these resolutions are completed, on both from the commissioners and from you guys, if it is, then the commissioners and council are out, totally out, other than the representatives, and this becomes the negotiation, our negotiation party for the county. Is that correct?
That would be correct, yeah. The redevelopment commission would own the property, and they would be negotiating to acquire the other
Perfect.
property.
I just want to make that clear, that now it's out of the hands of the county council and county commissioners, and it's on these here.
I had a
Another,
related question before we go on.
Sure.
Let's say we can't get anywhere, can we then transfer that property back to the county?
Yeah, so two identical resolutions, just like we're doing today, and you can pass it right back.
So we're really here to consider options, and if we can't, it can go right back to where it was, and
Right.
the county isn't out anything. So we're just here to help make a decision.
but basically, it's just on these two pieces of property to switch. This is what it's all about. And once that's done, once these resolutions, it's how the county council and county commissioners, unless it goes back.
Right.
to it. And I would assume after the transfer and everything else that this organization would have, be privy to the appraisals. It would only make sense that the redevelopment committee would be immediately. Am I correct?
So as the first resolution, or no, sorry, this first resolution ratifies the receipt of the appraisals. So once the redevelopment commission hasn't technically hired the appraisers. The appraisers, units of government do this all the time, where something will happen and then they ratify it rather than approve it, and then it happens. Little fiddly things like selecting appraisers. So once they've ratified hiring the appraisers, then the appraisers were hired and the reports become acquired, if you will.
Sure.
Yes, so immediately after they would.
But they would also have the option to go to a third appraiser,
You certainly would.
which I would highly, and I said online, I would like to see three. And the third one needs to be not Monroe County. It needs to be somewhere far away that nobody knows, but knows, can find out, vet their reputation. So they come in, we worked out all the bugs that were there, and this appraisal company comes in as a third thing, and now I think you have to have three. And we're not talking a ton of money for an appraisal.
$2,500.
Yeah, I mean, on a multi-million-dollar project,
Right.
that's worth the investment, and everybody knows I like to spend money. And then Craig especially, that, I think it's worth the investment. The other thing I think it'd be worth an investment, and it was touched upon on the timber, that has it ever been thought about bringing a private forester in to do an evaluation of the standing timber there now? And what they can do, because we've had this done on our properties, is they come in and they do a plot test. He picked out 10 plots on our farm. He didn't do the whole farm because we could, but we would have to pay him. But did 10 test plots that gave him a good idea of how much timber's on there. Just a thought to have.
That's why I wanted to open it up, let you share your ideas.
Everybody,
We're open
I
to your
talk
ideas.
to and other things that they're like, again, nothing against the person we're dealing with, businessman, I appreciate that. But, he didn't want to lose. And he knows the timber. You all don't. So, just a thought. I don't think it costed, again, a ton of money. I think it'd be worth the investment to at least make some phone calls and find out about that. But I think that was my main things, was a third appraisal, making sure you all have control. I totally, when you first started talking, I was like most of the people, like, oh, come on. But it makes sense. We've all probably bought and sold a house. When we were the seller, did the buyer hand us the appraisal? No way. So it makes sense. As a public person, yes, I want to know. But I have to put my trust into this commission. And that's what I will do, because I feel like, even though I may not agree with each and every one of your decisions, I personally trust you all to make the right decisions for this county. So thank you for doing it.
Thank
I
you,
appreciate
Tom.
that,
And
Tom.
can I add one thing? The reason Polly and I are sitting here by the positions, whether it doesn't have to be the president, a member of the council and the commissioners are required by state to sit on this board. So we're not here by choice, we're here because it's part of our job.
Understand.
I want the public to
Yeah,
understand that.
I don't foresee you trying to snake in the back, so don't think, that's why I said, I trust the people there.
Thanks, Don.
Greg?
Don?
Don Mayor, just one comment on Gary's mention of the income from the property tax that we'll be getting if Franklin does acquire 96 acres. Has there been any mention at all of a tax abatement for him in the future? I don't think he would technically qualify for it, but there would be ways around that. I just want to make sure that would not be the case.
He'd have to bring something to the table pretty good to get that.
Yeah.
I mean, because we all know with abatements, there's an eventual, the county's gonna win eventually on an abatement because of what they bring to the table. So that's a whole different ballgame.
I only think it makes sense to go forward with this transaction as long as, it's pretty close to apples to apples. We're gonna generate income for the rest of eternity on that property. Plus, acquire the property from jail at no cost.
And Don, I just want to throw
Thanks,
one
Don.
thing in here that people probably don't understand. The county owns roughly 783 acres of property. The county does. But we're not collecting a dime off of it. We need to do something about that. Now, some of it's horrible. I'll admit that. But here's an opportunity to put some of that back on the tax roll, and that's what this is all about in this transaction.
What'd you have, Bobby?
Okay, they probably do not have access to the minutes, and I made the motion on this, to look into this, but I also said without obligation, because I've got the same thoughts that all you people got, and I'm a broker, you know that, and we've got different qualifications on this board, which I feel like that the people of this county is going to be well served. We're not taking this very lightly, no. And the figures, it's going to have to come out and be pretty good for, I think, for the exception of all of it. So, but I do understand the process. The reason that we're going through all of this is very similar. I think, Hunter, it's about similar to the state park. They want a different entity to have vision on what's happening here, so people in the government can't just run away and do whatever they want to do without any obstacle to be looked at. So it's a good process. I didn't understand it at first until I got to getting further into how government really works and protects you. So without obligation, we agreed to start further looking into this. None of us really made any commitments from that on.
And Commissioner Hall, there would be no obligation until after the public hearing.
Right.
So there is Attorney Meeks was letting me know too, that there is a process on the detail, but that you can do where you can lock it down, at least on the other person's side,
Right.
so that we can then disclose the appraisals before the public hearing.
Right.
So they would be transparent at that point. There is a way to do it that won't put us in that disadvantage position. So, but yes, there's no final obligation until we get to the end.
So I hope that all of you are beginning to understand we're here to represent you people fairly. Yes.
Can I come up and ask a couple questions?
Sure.
Okay. So I don't normally do this as a reporter. I kind of find it a little unconventional to come up and make any public comment. And so with that, I have some questions for clarification in my own stories. And also I think that maybe the public generally would want to know and maybe would help with this. And so I know that some of this maybe is not redevelopment commission specific, but the whole issue is kind of coming and being placed onto this commission's shoulders in a way just through this property exchange and because it has so many eyes on it. So my first question is about the possibility of eminent domain. Has that even been, I know it's not favorable and it's not a pretty thing anytime, but has that even been considered, explored, discussed, anything? And if so, can you share a little bit about that? And that may be more of a commissioner's
I can
aspect.
explain a little bit. Eminent domain is a legal process that is an expensive process to go through. Plus, you're still having to pay for the property, a fair market value. So you're putting money out, and the goal, from what I understood from everyone, is they didn't want to be put money out. They wanted to find a way to do an exchange. Basically, I mean, there's appraisals and surveys, things like that have to be done, but minimal cost involved. But that process is long, it's tenuous, it's expensive, and it's usually a last resort that's done.
Okay. And then, do we know what the anticipated tax revenue would be from adding these 96 acres back onto the tax roll?
I have asked the the assessor to put that together for me, and I'm still waiting on that.
Okay,
But
thank you.
I will have that information.
Okay.
And I don't know if it'll be $1,000 or 10,000, but whatever it is, it's more than we're getting today.
And then I think something that maybe would help me as a reporter, but also the public, to know kind of in general what sort of ballpark difference, even if not exact numbers are not shared, there's a big difference between a couple $1,000s in assessed value difference and, $100,000, $200,000, $1 million, that sort of thing does come up. So that would be just something that, even if not sharing the exact numbers, sharing a ballpark could be a way.
I believe that I would recommend to the redevelopment commission that they not comment on that at this time until there is some sort of, because that could still be disadvantaged, because that's going to give the other party additional information that they didn't already have. So
Would the other party not also do their own appraisal of the property that they're wanting?
and they can do that if they so choose.
So-
I don't know if they are or not.
The way I would
They
answer
wouldn't share
that,
that with us either.
as we go through this process and we identify a difference, if we decide to move ahead in spite of that difference, we are definitely going to disclose why. What we saw that made that difference worth it to land there, okay? Because transparency is going to be important, because we're going to want the public to understand why we made the decision. Right now, I have no clue because I haven't even seen the numbers. But I'm kind of happy to be part of this process because the public trust is very important. And I like that we have such a variety on this board that can be part of this. And I think we're going to have a good process.
And then just two other things, since two members of this commission were not in that joint meeting, something that I would like to clarify that has not been fully represented in either the last redevelopment commission meeting or this one, is that the original proposed trade, in which nobody opposed, was for 30 acres from Mr. Franklin for 107 acres, not 96 for 9.6.
That wasn't the proposal, that was discussion that we own 30 acres out there. There's not 30 acres of developable ground out there. It's a quarry hole. So that was the discussion, but then it got to what is usable out there for the county.
But I just wanted to say that those were the numbers that were presented and therefore no opposition at that point. And then just something based on what I've heard in this meeting from both the commissioner and a council member, I would just caution to be careful with the open door law, because if there were any conversations between commissioners, that would be a violation of the open door law. And the council in particular has to be careful of serial meetings, which it would be.
We are. I call them one-on-one. We don't get together and talk. I call them, each one individually when we discuss
phone calls
things like
aren't
that.
Phone calls between two commissioners would be considered a meeting, and receiving information is considered official action under the open door law.
On the 30 acres and this is a question I have, is none of that anything that we could use?
Brian?
It is a quarry pit. It is all rock, literally all rock. I've been out there to look at it. It is a hole.
He wanted to keep his office trailer and his scale house where he weighs trucks in and out there, so we had to piece out around that. There's probably another 4 or 5 acres there if you could get that particular spot, but he didn't want to give that up. When we're asking, it's hard to demand anything.
Thanks for your questions. Yes, sir.
Sorry. I was going to, well, that's still on the tax roll.
Yeah.
That property.
Yeah, it's still on, yeah.
So that other 20 acres is still.
It's still getting paid taxes on
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, if we took it, it wouldn't be.
That's true.
And it's worthless ground. So you're right, Tom, we're still collecting money.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a soft voice on that.
That's okay.
Jeff Marks, Fish Creek Road. I have two questions. One is related to, we keep talking about the fact that whatever happens is it's not going to be a deal where the county spends money, right, to get the land. We're going to be out there. But in my time working, if the difference in price, I'm going to make it up, I have no idea, if the difference in value is $100,000, then we left $100,000 on the table. It's $100,000 that over the 30-year mortgage of the facility turns into $360,000. Okay? So, and I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is saying it's at no cost to us. There is a cost if the appraisals are not actually the same. Okay? There is a cost. It's a hidden cost, but there's a cost. Okay? Right? And I think when we find out, whenever that is, what the difference is, okay, that cost needs to be understood as the cost, an additional cost the county undertook to get the jail built. And I'm okay with that, but I'm not okay with saying we got it all for, I didn't get my wallet out, but I lost $250,000.
No, it's a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Right, and then the second item is, we've been looking around, so I don't know what the redevelopment commission does. I'm sorry, I don't, so forgive me. But it sounds like this would have been a great opportunity for the redevelopment commission to get involved in trying to find the land for the jail in the first place. Okay, to redevelop land in the county, but maybe that's not the case. And I will add on to that, and Mr. Franklin probably, if he gets it, he can probably do something with this. You know what you can do with the 6 acres of landfill? You can put a solar farm on it, okay? And you can collect either a percentage or something else or you can trade that energy for your utility bills.
Can I say something about the solar farm?
Yeah.
It has to be close to a
It does.
electric source, so it's It also has to be wide open. And, I mean, this is surrounded by trees, so I don't know whether the solar farm would be interested in this.
That cap cannot be damaged out there at the landfill. I've got all the IDEM reports. Those have been forwarded to Mr. Franklin. I have seen them. John Reeves, our health department, has seen them.
Yep.
There are certain stipulations what can happen there. And breaking the cap of that landfill is not one of them.
Right, so understand that, but it's been done elsewhere, so maybe ours is different, so. Okay, and so once fine, that just, I'm curious, I would hope that you would think about, not in this case, but in the future, think about, when you're faced with these kinds of things, think about all the possibilities. Thank you.
Thank you for coming today, appreciate it. Yes, sir.
Does it sound like we're going to get a third appraisal?
We'll decide that when we see the first two.
I would like to see one.
We certainly have the ability to do that, and I appreciate the suggestion, so.
We got to get through step one before we can get to
Yeah.
step two.
But that's why I'm glad to be here. I take the public trust not lightly, and we want to be able to stand before you sometime when we get to that public comment to justify why we're moving ahead. I mean, it's going to be a process, and it doesn't have to be on a certain timetable. We may require more time. We have a suggested timetable, but we can certainly decide to take the time we need to do what we think we need to do